Welcome back in, everybody. It's the 21 off season. I'm about 10 months late to be talking about Patrick Mahomes' big contract, but better late than never, I guess. We're going to talk about right now today, and then we're also going to talk about restructuring and what it looks like for teams going forward as they restructure. So today I want to start off with Patrick Mahomes. He signed a 10-year 480 last offseason. Technically speaking, that deal hasn't kicked in yet, and it really won't kick in until 2022. In 2021, he's going to be making $24.8 million dollars. And that is really the 5th year option that he already had signed and exercised from a season ago that they exercised before last offseason. So really the deal doesn't kick in 2022. It's a massive deal. 10 years, $480 million, dollars, the biggest the NFL has ever seen. I said this last offseason before they actually did this deal that there was really no point because Patrick Mahomes is so good and so young. There was really no use in kind of mucking around and trying to nickel and dime this thing and trying to negotiate this thing. I don't feel this way about most of the contracts in the NFL. For instance, I certainly don't feel this way about Dak Prescott in Dallas. I have a very different take on what's going on down in Dallas than I do right here with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. But Patrick Mahomes has been so good, and he is so young, and he looks like he's going to be this good for a very, very long time. That my feeling last offseason was there really was no reason for Kansas City to drag their feet on this deal and to push Patrick Mahomes through a franchise tag or two franchise tags and to just let this draw out. And Kansas City did exactly what I was hoping that they would do, and they just went ahead and got the deal done. It's a boatload of money. It's a huge cap hit every single season. Does it make winning more difficult? Absolutely. Have we seen anybody else in the NFL pay a quarterback of any caliber a huge cap hit and continue to compete for Super Bowls? We have not. It just hasn't happened. I think Kansas City can do it. I think Patrick Mahomes is that good. I think they'll figure it out. I think eventually other teams will figure it out. But so far, it just hasn't happened. Now, I don't want that to be the focus of the video today. The contract is done. I totally agree that they should have done it. I totally agree with the amount of money that they gave him. And like several of you have already said, I feel exactly the same way. I'll take Mahomes and a huge contract number any day over being another NFL franchise who either A, can't seem to find a quarterback who's worth putting on the field in the first place, or B, also has a huge cap number, but they're just nowhere near as good as Patrick Mahomes. So Kansas City did exactly 100% the right thing here by going ahead and getting Patrick Mahomes signed up to this massive, massive contract. And we'll walk our way through every single season here in just a second. But that's the point I want to get across first, is that they did an excellent job of just getting this done. Don't make Mahomes feel uncomfortable or worried or anxious or frustrated or upset because you didn't just go ahead and get the deal done. With other players, I do not feel the same way. I don't feel like other positions besides quarterback can have as big of an impact on winning. I don't feel like handing out big cap numbers to other players at other positions unless the deal makes sense. There's a whole lot of other things to consider. But here, it was black and white. And I don't usually live in black and white, but here was black and white what they should have done here. And they absolutely did it last offseason. 10 years, $480 million. There's a lot to talk about here. First of all, I want to talk about the 1/5, 1/6. No matter what the salary cap looks like, and basically, more or less, we kind of know what the salary cap is going to look like for the next several seasons. Over the next 8 to 10 years, I don't think it's going to be incredibly shocking that we're just going to see the salary cap double or anything like that. It's going to grow at a steady rate. And because of that, Mahomes' contract numbers basically every season will tend to be about a fifth to a sixth of the overall cap for that year. So that means basically before the season even starts, you have one player who is already going to occupy either a fifth of that cap for that year or a sixth of it, one or the other, depending on which season. Now, his number's going to get bigger as the years go along. So is everybody else's. Other quarterbacks are going to sign big contracts. Other teams are going to have these same problems. Many of those other teams are going to have quarterbacks on big contracts who aren't anywhere near as good as Patrick Mahomes. So you're not on dangerous ground here. You're going to continue to compete. You're going to continue to win a lot of games. You're going to be good. Can you figure out how to get yourself back in the Super Bowl year in and year out with a big cap number like this. I think Kansas City can do that. I've got my own set of ideas, of course I do, about how to make that happen. We'll see what Kansas City does with it moving forward. But I thought this absolutely had to get done. No fooling around here, no wasting time with this, no debating, well, can you give us $3 million a year less or something like that? Just get it done and move forward with life. You had your rookie quarterback window. You took advantage of it. You went to 3 straight AFC title games. You went to 2 straight Super Bowls. You won one of those Super Bowls. Conceivably, it would not have been hard at all for Kansas City to have had 3 straight Super Bowl appearances and victories. It just didn't work out that way, but you did everything you could, I thought, within reason, to take advantage of Patrick Mahomes' rookie quarterback window, and now you just move on. Are you going to be challenged by other teams with quarterbacks who are young and on more efficient contracts, and those other quarterbacks are playing pretty good too? Yeah, you're going to be challenged by those teams and those kinds of rosters, but that's okay. You'll deal with it. Can you imagine Patrick Mahomes playing for any other team? Absolutely not. Okay, absolutely. We cannot imagine him in any other uniform. This was the right deal. Absolutely no question about it. In this case, with this player, at this position, at this time, perfect thing to do. They handled it just exactly right. Okay. That's the 1/5, 1/6, the 2-year step thing. Basically, the way that they built this contract, and usually I absolutely loathe and despise the idea of practical guarantees, because usually there's some way to bust up that contract to where the player just doesn't get everything that he thought he would possibly get, either because of injury, or the team just decided to go in a different direction, or the player just isn't playing very well after a couple of seasons. Usually there's a way to bust up that contract after 2 or 3 seasons with a dead cap hit that isn't brutal, or even if it is brutal, we've started to see teams take brutal cap hits like Philadelphia did to get rid of Carson Wentz, and Carson Wentz didn't get all the money that was practically guaranteed. So I hate, in general, the idea of practical guarantees. In Patrick Mahomes' case, the way they built the contract, he is practically guaranteed a boatload, mountain, massive money. If he were injured, basically there are $140 million worth of injury guarantees written in. Even if he never played another snap for Kansas City, because of the injury guarantees, he's getting $140 million, basically, more or less, no matter what. In addition to that, there's a 2-year step that's kind of built in. So in the spring of 21, right now, if he were to get injured and never take another snap for Kansas City, if that were to happen, even after the injury guarantees, basically you're paying Mahomes for 2 more seasons through 22 and 23, no matter what. In the spring of 22, the same thing happens again. There are roster bonuses that kick in for 23 and 24, so on and so forth. And you see that 2-year step all the way. So at any point, if Patrick Mahomes, which he never will, if Patrick Mahomes were to start stinking it up and playing bad, and he will never do that, but even if he were, and Kansas City decided to move on, they basically still have to pay him for 2 more seasons no matter what, because of the guarantees that are built in and the way the roster guarantees are built 2 years ahead of time. If he were to get injured, never play another snap again for Kansas City, depending on when it happened during this 10-year contract, there's 2-year steps built in. Even if they decided to get rid of him, say in 2024, they would basically already be paying him for 24 and 25. Okay, so there's a lot of money here that Mahomes is going to get no matter what happens. Now, he's going to be healthy for a very long time. Can you imagine what all of us are going to be doing in 2031, 10 years from now, when Patrick Mahomes is 10 years older? Hopefully we have several more championships to look back on for Kansas City. Hopefully they get all of that figured out. But can you imagine? This is a 10-year deal. We've seen it before in baseball, but it's very unusual for football. Usually you only see 5 or 6-year deals at the most at the NFL level. This is a 10-year deal. I'm going to be 10 years older. You're going to be 10 years older. Mahomes is going to be 10 years older. Can you imagine by the time we get to 2031, there are so many years in this contract, I couldn't even fit them all right here. I had to bump 2 of them over here. It's a long, long, long contract. Mahomes is here for the duration. He is guaranteed massive amounts of money, even if he gets injured, even if he doesn't get injured and they want to move on from him because he's playing bad or something, like Carson Wentz happened to do in Philadelphia, which that's not going to happen with Patrick Mahomes. But even if it were, basically they'd have to pay him for 2 more seasons anyway. because of the way they've built this contract and the way they've guaranteed it. Like I said, 2021 still is not the start of the contract. Last year, 2020, he had a ridiculously small number. The best probably contract you've ever seen while he was still in that rookie deal. I think he was making $5 or $6 million last season. It jumps this year. That is the 5th-year option right there, $24.8 million that Kansas City exercised. The contract really kicks in 2022, and that's when you see the contract start to jump up into more modern levels, $31.5 million. That would still be a steal for a guy like Patrick Mahomes. Anybody in the NFL would be happy to pay $31.5 million for Patrick Mahomes. He's that good. So in 22, you see the number jump up again. Now, the real meat of this deal, and they kind of stepped it in, and usually I don't like backloaded contracts. Usually I'm not a fan of that. I just don't like it. I like to see them more even keeled. In this case, though, I like what Kansas City did by kind of easing themselves into it because the contract is so darn massive. It is huge. And they step it up here from the $5 or $6 million of the rookie contract in 2020 to the 24.8 in 2021, goes to 31.5 in 2022. And then by 23, you start to get into that real meat of that number, $42.5 million. Massive cap. They've got basically 2 off seasons here to figure out how to get the rest of the roster streamlined so that they don't feel the pressure of these financial decisions every single off season. They've kind of got it all packaged together better. They've got a couple of off seasons to do that. 2023, $42.5 million. And from there, you see it stabilize for the most part. 24 is $40 million. 25 is $41.9 million. 2026 is $41.9 million. Let me stop real quick right here and say, I love Spot Track. I love Over the Cap. I love both websites. I got all of these numbers from both of those websites put together. I love them both. They do an excellent job. So thank you, Spot Track. Thank you, Over the Cap, for these numbers today. In 26, you see it go to 41.9 for those 2 seasons. There's a massive jump again here in 2027. This is really weird. I'm going to come back to this, but the reason that there's a massive jump here, and I don't know why they did this, but the reason for it is that the base salary actually jumps by a lot in 2027 for that one season. Every other season here, the base salary is actually very low. Most of the money is tied up in roster bonuses. By the time you get to 27, it jumps all the way $60 million, but then it comes back down in 28 and 29 to 44.5, 44.9, and then you come over here to the last 2 years of the deal, it's 50.5 and it's 52.5. So you really see it grow over the years. Don't hate that for a contract that's this big with cap numbers that are this big. Usually I don't like that for other deals for other players. With Patrick Mahomes' deal, I don't mind that at all. In theory, the idea is, and I get this with all backloaded contracts, it grows as the cap grows, but basically one contract can eat up the growth that there was going to be. So all those other 10 contracts that you backloaded, there's no room for them to grow because you already took it up with the growth from one cap number. But in this case, I don't mind that at all, the kind of the backloaded deal here. Usually, and we talked about the injury protection as well. Usually you can take a contract like this and kind of treat it like a bank. You go to it for money that you need. You borrow money from it for other things. Now, Patrick Mahomes' contract, until you get to 2027, there is really no base salary. There is no unguaranteed money. And even by the time you get to 27, there's really not either, because they're going to already guarantee that money by the time they get to 2025. But the funny thing here is usually you can restructure a contract like this if you want to. If you say, well, in 2021, we need an extra $20 million, which Kansas City basically does, just to fill out the rest of the roster. Then if we want to sign another free agent, we're going to need another $5 to $10 million. And that if we want to re-sign anybody like Watkins or Wiley or Ward, we're going to need probably another $5 to $10 million to do that. So in 2021, in theory, if you needed another $40 million, you could restructure several guys, and this would be the best way to do it. I say best because I don't like restructures anyway, but this would be the best way to do it if you were going to restructure somebody, because there's the most money involved, and you wouldn't have to restructure as many players. You could just restructure 1 or 2 players. But there's really no base money involved here. There's no base salary. The money's already guaranteed. So as far as I can tell, Kansas City really cannot use this contract for restructuring purposes because there's no unguaranteed money, there's no base salary, there's no unguaranteed base salary to restructure here. Now, I don't have access to the league's offices. I don't have access to a lawyer who can sit down and look at all this and tell me every contract I've ever looked at over the past several years now. Anytime the NFL is restructuring any contract, they are always restructuring unguaranteed money, which is base salary. And in this case, there's just no unguaranteed money, no base salary to restructure. So my feeling is that Kansas City built it that way because they probably knew that they just didn't want to restructure this. They were going to keep the cap numbers the same way. Now, keep that in mind. If some of you know somebody who actually knows the technical answer to that question, send them on to me. Let me know. I would love to hear from them. I don't need an opinion on that. I need an actual technical answer to a very technical question. But if you know anybody like that, send them on to me. But the point is here, I don't know that they're actually going to restructure this contract over the years because I don't know that there's anything for them to restructure here. Okay. Having got past that, we've talked about Patrick Mahomes' contract. I do want to talk about restructures in general for a minute here, just because there are other contracts on the Chiefs roster that if Kansas City needs money just for this offseason, they can restructure it. And I'm going to use his contract as an example of how they do it. So Kansas City, we know they need about $20 million just to fill out the roster this year. Forget free agents, forget re-signing anybody, just to fill out the roster. They are going to need about $20 million to just do that. So if they needed $20 million, basically what they would do, they would go to the base salary of that player, and they would take $20 million off the base salary, and they would convert it into a signing bonus. It doesn't hurt the player any. He's not getting more money. He's not getting less money. He's getting the same amount of money. Basically, all that means is that amount of money, which was not guaranteed, is now guaranteed. The second thing is because it's a signing bonus, instead of it hitting in one season, they can spread that out over 5 seasons. So what they would do, they would take that $20 million and they would put $4 million of it on each of the next 5 seasons, including, not to be complicated here, including the season that they're already on. Okay, so $4 million of it would go into 21. What would also happen though is, and this cap number, that cap number would shrink all the way down to 16.8. Okay, it would go all the way down. I'm sorry, that's not right. That would go down to 8.8. Sorry for that. These other numbers with that $4 million, this would grow to then 35.5. In 23, this number would grow to 46.5. This number would grow to 43.9, and this number would grow to 45.9. So because of the restructuring, and this is true of any player that you restructure, whether it's Patrick Mahomes or Frank Clark or Chris Jones or you fill in the blank, any player that they restructure, they get a break that year, but that money doesn't disappear. It goes onto future cap numbers, and that's what happens. So if Kansas City, and this is the important part, they're going to have to restructure. Most NFL teams are going to have to restructure this season because the cap shrunk this year. But the price of doing that too much is that you are putting money onto future seasons and you've already used up that money for 2021. Okay, you've already basically got the benefit, which means if they were to restructure Patrick Mahomes, and again, I don't think they can do that with the Mahomes deal, but they can do that with some of the other players. If they take $4 million and put it on the 22, that would be now, instead of $31.5 million they've got to pay him, it's $35.5 million for the one player that they already had on the roster anyway, just to keep a guy on the roster for 2021. And they would have had to do that for each of those 5 seasons. And again, this works no matter how many players you do it with and no matter the name of the player, if they say we would need that $10 million to sign a free agent, we need that $10 million to re-sign another guy, and this $20 million balloons to $40 million of restructuring that Kansas City would have to do instead of the 4. I'm going to erase that for just a second. Instead of the $4 million, it would be $8 million worth of restructures every year. Now keep in mind, my overall cap isn't growing. I don't have any more money. The owner can't come in and spend extra money. All that's done is I've added a burden on the future seasons. So if I need to sign, if I need to fill out the roster, if I need an extra 10 for a free agent, if I need an extra 10 to re-sign anybody on the roster that I want to re-sign, period, whether that's Ward or Wiley or fill in the blank, whatever player we decide we want to re-sign, it's going to restructures. And those restructures are going to add those $8 million to each of those future seasons, which means for Patrick Mahomes, for whoever the player is, we would have spent now $50 million basically to keep one player, basically all on one player. And then we've still got all the other 51 or 50 roster spots to fill out. That's a very quick look at a very complicated thing, and I know most of you already get that. You already understand that, but just understand that restructuring is not a get out of jail free card. It's not a fun way to go through life. Short term, it can get you, maybe if you're like, man, we need to win this year. We've got the roster. We just need to keep it together for one more season, so make one more run at it. I understand it, but in general, over the years, as we get past 2021, as we get into the deeper parts of the roster for Kansas City, I would like to see them stay away from as much of this restructuring as they can. And that means some of those other contracts are going to have to just go away. Okay, that's basically what that means, because Patrick Mahomes' contract, it isn't going anywhere. It's going to be staying. All right, that's a lot right there. I know some of you are going to have questions. Some of you are going to like, Ben, I already know that. Thank you very much. But that's the Patrick Mahomes contract. That's a quick look at what restructuring does to future seasons based on the numbers that we are looking at here. Thank you very much. We'll see you. Bye.